Great. So I think I'm going to get us started. I know we're a few minutes after the hour. It's so great to see so many of you. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Michael Kay. I'm going to be your host and moderator. We are joining each other today from various lands and territories. I myself and Carmen, our presenter, both live and work in New York City. I have my windows open today, so you can probably hear the beeping. Just it's part of the ambiance. If you are joining us today for the first time, the Impact Communications Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is committed to educating professional communicators on the discipline of authentic and transparent communications and how to use the tools of communications to drive positive systemic change. Our global network consists of more than 1,200 communicators from around the world, super impressive, who stand in solidarity to demonstrate and promote the importance of responsible, purpose-led communications practices. And we welcome all of you to join us on our journey by pledging right on our website. For those who don't already know, this is a big part of our mission, or a big part of our mission is to keep these learnings widely accessible to folks everywhere. So each month we host these free to attend Impact Councils. Our Impact Councils feature inspiring communicators or brands discussing important topics, trends, and best practices that are critical for authentic and impactful communications. Most importantly, we learn about solutions to some of the issues impacting today's society. And no, I am not just talking up our Impact Councils simply because I did one a couple years ago. It's because I truly, absolutely love each of these presentations. And today, I'm so excited for this. I am joined by Carmen Boon, the Vice President of External Affairs at the Food Bank of New York City. Carmen leverages her expertise to empower individuals towards achieving sustainable food security. She brings over 20 years of experience, and Carmen's skills in crafting public affairs and media relations outreach strategies, as well as integrated media campaigns, have heightened awareness for numerous governmental and nonprofit programs. With a broad portfolio encompassing affordable housing, social services, workers' rights, human rights, public health care, food security, poverty, and economic mobility, Carmen has received recognition, well-deserved recognition, such as the Shorty Award, Marcom Award, PR Week Purpose Award, and AVA Digital Award. And that brings me to today's topic, which is mastering policy and advocacy communications with authenticity. I bet no one's ever heard the word authenticity before, so let me know if you need us to define it. In today's world, traditional methods of policy communication, such as lengthy press releases, may lose people's interest, resulting in ineffective outreach and a low level of participation or worse, compliance with the policy at hand. Understanding that today's citizens are emotionally driven, our communication must adapt to stay persuasive and impactful. This presentation will guide us through this complex landscape, providing you with practical tips and presenting case studies from diverse sectors to shed light on the challenges and strategies of policy communication. Now, before I toss it over to Carmen, a couple of housekeeping items. Please keep yourselves on mute throughout this session. We are recording, and the last 10 minutes of our time will be served for audience Q&A. So please add any questions that you may have right into the chat at the bottom, and we will do our best to address as many of them as we possibly can. But without further ado, I want to toss it over to our incredible speaker today, Carmen Boon.
Thank you, Michael, for that kind introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining from many corners of the world. I am excited to be here. Thank you. Thanks to the Impact Communications Institute for inviting me to talk about a favorite issue, area of mine, which is policy and advocacy communications. I'm going to dive in directly into the index of the overview of this presentation. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about me and how I ended up in this area. Then we're going to talk about the importance of policy and advocacy in society, in case some of you don't know. Also, we'll talk about understanding policy and advocacy communications and communicators in this area, the challenges and opportunities faced by these professionals, the role of authenticity in decoding complexity, couple of case studies from my career, and also at the end of the presentation, we're going to talk about some master takeaways and recommendations. And then we're going to have the Q&A. We'll be happy to take some questions and talk about next steps. All right, so this is me. I am originally from Venezuela. I got to the US over 20 years ago. I studied journalism in Venezuela, and I chose an unplanned concentration of political journalism. And I say unplanned because my professors happen to be journalists that were in the politics and government sections of newspapers and media in Venezuela. So a lot of the examples that I learned during my time in college was in that area. So that's how I ended up kind of like knowing more and be more interested in the area itself. Then I came to New York City on a Fulbright grant to pursue a master's in media studies at the New School in Manhattan. I ended up, after graduating, working in global and in local humanitarian work here in New York City. My first job in New York City was at the Venezuelan consulate and mission to the UN. And I worked closely with NYC government agencies and community-based organizations to build immigration communications type of campaigns for our constituents. After that, I worked in the government of New York City for 15 years. Michael already mentioned some of my areas, my portfolio of affordable housing, civic engagement, social services, workers and consumer rights, and protections, human rights, and public health care. And now I'm working in the nonprofit sector. I have the pleasure to create synergies between public affairs and communications in the food insecurity and poverty relief space. Before I dive in, I wanted to also make a professional disclaimer. I wanted to really say that this webinar is the result of years of studying and implementing tips and best practices in this area. I have collected from my own experiences, of course. This is one approach of many. There isn't specific winning formula, like in many areas of communications, as you all know. And I have to thank all the exceptional government affairs and communications teams and mentors that I've met in my entire career. Nobody does this work alone, so I wanted to give them credit for that. And also I want to highlight some of the institutions and professional organizations, associations in this space that are doing fantastic work to create more tools and resources for all of us. Some of them are the Public Affairs Council, Advocacy Institute, the Nonprofit Marketing Guide Community, the Public Relations Society of America, Boulder Advocacy, which is the great advocacy arm of the Alliance for Justice, and even resources from for-profit enterprises like Quorum, Fiscal Note, Politico, and others. As I mentioned, I wanted to talk a little bit about, the importance of policy and communication. I am somebody who has encountered skeptical questions throughout my career about this area, from family members, coworkers, friends, on what do I do, right? So I just kind of wanted to just highlight that, policy and advocacy are crucial for society, to shape societal norms and regulations, driving change and engaging stakeholders. We're talking about influencing massive programs that impact millions and that in many ways determine the future of our communities across towns and cities. Public policy is about influencing decision makers to affect the outcome of those public policies, such as programs, laws, and regulations. I really liked an article that I read recently in Quorum about this. So I'm going to paraphrase from the article a little bit. Businesses often advocate for or against public policies that impact their operations and foundations, such as tax incentives and trade agreements. Nonprofit organizations like mine work on policies that align with their missions, such as human rights, social services, public poverty relief. Constituents often participate in public policy advocacy to support or denounce policies in greater good areas, right? Such as healthcare and education. And even government agencies, like in the case study that I'm going to show later in this presentation from the NYC Commission on Human Rights, advocate for policies that impact their operations and responsibilities. Why is public policy important? Well, public policy is important because it bridges gap between constituents and all those important centers of powers that we find at the city council, state legislators, school and community boards, and even members of Congress. And this is just a little, a very short description of what a communications professional does in this area, right? So this is a communications field that focuses on effectively messaging policy and advocacy to members, to fellow staff members, members of the public interested in advocacy, community influencers, I'm sorry, and members of the public who will benefit from a policy, right? So the goal is to ensure support, participation, and compliance with a public policy. And who is a policy communicator? I have encountered many different types of professionals with very diverse backgrounds, but this I'm just kind of like naming here, just mentioning two that are very common, which is people with political or government background and an interest in and talent for communications, and also former journalists who covered government and politics and now works in government, nonprofits, and the private sector, right? These professionals play a vital role in messaging policy to key audiences, navigating complex issues with clarity, and helping advance the legislative strategy of any organization. I now would love to talk about challenges and opportunities in this area. First, the challenges, right? So it's not a surprise that we live in a very divided political environment. Trust in government is plummeting. Political uncertainty increases risk in every organization. And also, as we read every day, after we hear about certain kind of like news developments, that the public has come to expect organizations and companies to do more to fix social problems, right? That brings us to the opportunities. I learned about this just by doing it, but specialization in this area is becoming increasingly important, no matter what industry you're in. Also, there's a lot of potential to bring steady and lasting revenue to your organizations, to serve your clients, and also give your audiences what they need and want. You may be surprised, but the audiences that you may capture and retain through this work are some of the most loyal audiences that you may ever have as a communications professional. This is a great quote that I got from an article that I read on the Public Affairs Council website, The Rise of Policy Communications and Why It Matters. And it's a great way to kind of like encapsulate what this means, right? So this is not a simple matter to explain, but it's powerful when it is explained. And it really, really encompasses everything that we do in this area. It's very hard to kind of like see what we have to explain in the complexity of it, but when we reach the outcomes that are desired for every campaign, it is great to see the power that that brings to the work that we are doing. And that brings us to the role of authenticity in decoding complexity, right? Authenticity fosters clarity, trust, and credibility, ensures alignment with community values, and also promote transparency and accountability. We are going to be exploring practical aspects of this in the case studies that I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes. The two case studies that I chose for this presentation are one from the NYC Commission on Human Rights. I worked there a few years ago. I was the head of communications there, worked very closely with our policy and government affairs team. And the other one is from the Food Bank for New York City, where I am right now. And it's about a campaign that we're actually conducting at this moment. So it's very interesting to see how this is going to evolve. The case study at the NYC Commission on Human Rights is about the 2017 sexual harassment in the workplace campaign that we developed back then, responding to the global awareness on this issue. And as I mentioned, the campaign that I'm going to be showing here is a campaign on the state budget for a food secure New York as part of our work in Food Bank for New York City. The NYC Commission on Human Rights is charged with the enforcement of the human rights law. It's one of the most robust civil rights laws in the nation, and with educating the public on the rights and protections under the law and encouraging positive community relations. In 2017, December of 2017, the Commission decided to hold a public hearing on sexual harassment. It was the first time a Commission of Human Rights of New York City was holding such an impactful kind of like public forum on this subject. And that was, of course, as a response of the global awareness on sexual harassment in the workplace. Following the hearing, the Commission unveiled a policy report with recommendations to strengthen the law in various areas and also launched a public awareness campaign. The ultimate goal of this campaign was to educate employees on their rights so they could bring more claims of discrimination to the Commission, and also to educate employers on their obligations under the law. I wanted to take some time to talk about how we developed the messaging of this campaign, working with our lawyers and our policy and government affairs team. The campaign message highlighted common comments that our lawyers had identified in the cases that they were working on as part of the Law Enforcement Bureau. And those are these common scenarios that you see here are real scenarios that were part of our cases in this area, right? So I'm not gonna read them. You're gonna get this in a guide that we're gonna be sharing after the webinar. And that takes us to the videos that we also created pro bono with a leader in video storytelling with an expertise in issues disproportionately affecting women. These very simple videos were inspired by a letter from a victim's daughter that she sent this letter to the Commission's Law Enforcement Bureau, describing the toll of sexual harassment on her mother and her entire family. After assessing ethical considerations and to protect the privacy of the victim, the video producer selected diverse actors to read it on camera. So I'm just gonna play this video here. Let's hope it works.
I was always in a good mood. Then it happened.
My coworker approached me from the back, grabbed me, and pressed down on my shoulders hard.
I tried to get away, but he pressed down on me even harder.
The things she said to me while laughing sarcastically.
Does your husband please you like this? Does he get you excited?
With his hands on me, I was shaking and numb.
I was physically there, but emotionally far, far away.
I can't believe my coworker thought he could touch me that way. It made me never want to do anything or go anywhere.
It's not just flirting, just a hug, or just a joke. There is no excuse. This is sexual harassment, and New York City is ready to help and fight for you.
These videos, we had a few iterations for different platforms. They ran across Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Hulu. We got about 1 million views on those videos on those platforms. Also, our advertisement to educate people on the human rights law, it ran across diverse media, online newspapers, social media, out-of-home, retail establishments. And we also got a variety of earned media in news media, print and web, also community and ethnic media in other languages. This is, of course, I love the media campaign results, but I love to talk about also what followed after that. The policy report that recommended legislative changes that was the outcome of the hearing that we held. The report was disseminated to the offices of all NYC council members. This report informed the Stop Sexual Harassment Act, signed by the mayor of New York City in May of 2018. It included in the package an expansion of the city's human rights law in cases of gender-based harassment in the workplace. And the best result of all, for me and for everybody there, was that the reports of gender-based workplace harassment increased by over 36% over the course of 3 years since the launch of these efforts. As you can see here also, we developed, and you may see this in many of your workplaces, the Commission developed this for the first time as Stop Sexual Harassment Act notice that is posted in every private and public workplace of New York City. Case study number 2. As I mentioned, Food Bank for New York City is one of the largest hunger relief organizations of the city. We not only do food distribution through over 1,000 partners in the community, but we also run a variety of programs to help people towards self-sufficiency, such as tax prep, financial empowerment, and nutrition education programs. Every year, the government affairs team, public affairs team of Food Bank runs campaigns connected to the budget cycles of the different levels of government. Of course, we're talking about city, state, and federal, right? I wanted to focus here on a campaign that we are conducting right now, which is a state campaign for a food secure New York. This is a campaign that seeks to engage with state electeds to work with the governor, try to guarantee our programs, food insecurity programs are fully funded in the next fiscal year. And an important step that we took this year is cementing the notion that this is a communications campaign. In the past, we had a variety of efforts, communications efforts, but they were not really consolidated into one campaign. And that is what we did this year. And I'm just going to go over some of the activations that we developed as part of the campaign. For the first time, we developed a budget vision document that has iterations for different platforms and audiences. So we constantly adapt this one document for the different audiences that we're talking to, right? We created webinars with clear priorities and takeaways. Those are for external and external audiences. We have presented to volunteers, donors, our board, our employees. We are actually conducting right now an employee incentive campaign so that employees join our advocacy efforts too and join our advocacy team. So this is it was part of kind of like this all-encompassing campaign. And our testimonies are now having not only, of course, the stats and the impact and our asks and priorities, but also we are adding human interest stories in our testimony that we're presenting to the State Assembly and the Senate. And we held a coalition-based day of action in Albany, the state capital. That was we had a rally and a press conference that was attended by media, of course. And we held then one-on-one meetings with elected officials with all these kind of like policy and communications documents and assets that we developed as part of the campaign. And I wanted to take some time to talk about the digital media strategy. Food Bank, we have right now 2 fantastic new digital communications manager. That is Madison Rupert and Rachel Baker. She is our new social media manager, and she came up with a fantastic approach to
Hi, Mama. You okay?
develop and run social media on the state budget. We have an online petition, of course, that we developed with our partners in coalition across the state. And on social media, we are showing people how to fill out that petition, right? This is something that we didn't do before through a very dynamic reel. I'm not going to play that right now. You're going to get those links in the guide that we are sharing after the webinar. And also, like, you know, very importantly, we decided on our social media, we're going to be eliminating jargon and acronyms. We're also be injecting more a sense of humor, but staying respectful. And you can see that in this post that highlights a meme of Drake, the Canadian rapper, and it's to highlight some of the cuts in the executive budget released by the governor earlier this year. That has become the third most viewed TikTok post on our TikTok account. And also, like, another thing that we're doing that has been very powerful is finding the right analogies to explain the data. Sometimes in the past, what we didn't just kind of like having this long post with a lot of data that was very hard to digest and understand. And now we're having these very kind of like quick videos on social media that explain the data. Outcomes so far, we've had a couple of earned media stories. Very important, our line petition and website landing page. As you can see here, the landing page is ranking in the top 50 most viewed pages since it went live on February 7th. This is very important for us. This is a massive website, and to be among the top 50 is great. It's a milestone for this team. We also, the social media toolkit that we have on the landing page is the most downloaded link on the entire site. The average time spent on the page is 300%, which is higher than average. And our online petitions has collected so far 3,000 signatures. That is not great. We need to collect way more than that. So we are, we are on it. I mentioned that, the success on TikTok and Instagram, the same videos, the same reels that we have created. And they have gotten an incredible amount of views and interactions, people commenting and engaging. That goes back to what I said at the beginning about, people really being inclined to comment about this. There's an affiliation with current news developments and our politicians, that people feel connected to these issues and they feel prompted to say something on our social media. So sometimes, like a lot of our posts don't get a lot of interactions, but some of these state budget posts that we have on social media have gotten a lot of comments, which is great news. I collected a few master takeaways and recommendations based on these two case studies and also on some other kind of like, projects that I have conducted in this area. I wanted to, like with any other communications campaign, elected officials are human beings with their own personalities, beliefs, and ways of doing business, right? And with any other communications tactic, you have to target your communications to the right people. Just like there isn't really like a general public, there isn't really like a general kind of elected officials, right? So you have to target your communications to their values, their platforms, and everything that is connected to their work and the work that you're doing as part of the campaign that you're conducting. Electors are also bound by the process, so they can only do something if there's a specific bill in place. When we talk to electors, there is no such a thing as just kind of like connecting them to the issue, because they are, right? And a lot of course, depending on the political affiliation, this is part of even or their bread and butter, but they want to, they have very little time and they need a quick connection to a bill. They want to know what bill they have to sign on and how they can do that and get more support for those different legislations that are being connected to your issue. The third thing is something that we all know, which is creating compelling narratives that resonate with audiences, right? So, and also adding this to unusual assets, such as briefings, testimony, and other types of policy communications. Elected officials also like stories from their district, right? So they're constantly looking into kind of like constituent communications to find stories. If we can offer that to them as policy and advocacy communicators, this is going to be appreciated and it's going to have more impact in the way they communicate with their constituents too. Of course, like with any other communications campaign, and I'm saying this a lot because there isn't, like I said this at the beginning, there isn't really like a winning formula. A lot of what pertains to other communications fields is also very important in this one. So always connect with new cycles. It wouldn't be as powerful when we go out there with budget priorities or, policy kind of like priorities to talk to our elected officials unless we connect with news cycles that are happening right now, right? So this is something that we try to do in our talking points and in our different types of documents. And also, as you can see, I don't know if you saw when I showed them the social media post to have people sign on our petition. Setting a deadline is super important in this area, just kind of expressing urgency and also encouraging solidarity. Like if you don't do this today, this is a life and death issue. And this is very important when you communicate about the policies and you're running an advocacy campaign. The sixth takeaway is, as you can see, I mean, digital platforms are extremely important these days. There is a fiscal note report that reported that social media is every year is having a more prominent role in advocacy communications, as we know. So it's very important that you really take the time to study the platforms that you are going to be highlighting and also tailoring content for all those different platforms. Making sure to communicate outcomes to your stakeholders. This is very important too. When we released the report after the hearing of the NYC Commission on Human Rights sexual harassment campaign, we disseminated that report to our council members, but also to everybody who attended the hearing and everybody who signed up to get updates on this campaign. This is very important. And also when the Stop Sexual Harassment Act came out and was signed by the mayor, we made sure to communicate that and how that pertained, how was that relevant to the work that the Commission on Human Rights has done in the area. So it's very important to keep your participants informed of the progress of the campaign and of the outcomes. And also the last takeaway that I have here is developing flexible messaging for different scenarios, right? If you encounter in this area, there's a lot of like heated issues, opinions, perspectives, and people like to share that on social media too, as you know. And so you always have to have like flexible messaging to share and to be ready to respond in case you get, of course, press inquiries and things like that. The last slide that I have here as part of the presentation is my own kind of like set of resources and recommendations for people who want to deepen knowledge in this area or who want to just start becoming the new expert in policy and advocacy communications. One is that there are now careers in this area. I'm going to put some that I found in the guide that we're going to share. I'm going to put some that I found in some colleges and universities. There's a great one at NYU, Wagner on strategic communications in advocacy. There's another great one in, there's a policy communications lab at the University of Chicago. So I'll share those there. And also, something that has helped me over time is to subscribe and follow learning hubs. We're talking about, I mentioned this at the beginning, Public Affairs Council, Advocacy Institute, PR Society of America, and also the Impact Communications Institute, right? So there is a lot to find in the different resources that are chaired by these different organizations. And these same organizations are holding summits and conferences in this area. Annually, there's a variety of professionals that get together, share experiences, new tips, fresh campaigns, and it's just great to just really soak, yourself in that type of kind of like knowledge lab in this area, so that there's always something that you can take to your own practice in your own work, right? And last but not least, I wanted to mention also something that sometimes for all of us in the nonprofit sector, we find the communications teams are absorbed by fundraising communications, right? There is a lot of demand to create communications that speak to donors. But one important aspect that I wanted to mention, and this is just as a fresh statistic that came from a conference that we joined last week in Washington, D.C., which is, we belong to Feed in America. This is the largest nonprofit organization of the nation, and Food Bank and City Harvest are the two members of New York City of Feed in America. And they shared that 38% of advocates become donors. So there's always this kind of like, like people don't enter this space to just be one participant. they join this space and they become more loyal to the organization, and then that may prompt to other behaviors and other actions to support your mission. And with that, I wanted to thank you, and also if you have any questions, and also I'm putting here my Gmail and my LinkedIn profile, my QR code there. If anybody wanted to connect, I'd be happy to talk after the webinar. And Michael has some questions for me.
Thank you so much. I feel so sad that everyone followed the directions and stayed muted, because I feel like now is when we would hear applause, because that was incredible. So thank you so much for this presentation, and especially for sharing all those tips and resources at the end, Carmen. I have a couple of questions that I want to dive into quickly before we get to the audience questions that we received during your presentation. So the first one I have is, you discussed political uncertainty and how trust in the government is declining. This year, we have a presidential election in the United States, and with more than 60 countries holding major elections in 2024, what advice do you have for brands or nonprofits who might want to capitalize on the ongoing political conversations while still remaining bipartisan?
The main advice that I'd like to share is that, you have to take the time to study the election, and also incorporate messaging around opportunities and challenges in all your relevant platforms. You have to find out who may be leaving. That is a good contact for you in those offices, in those centers of power. And I'm not talking only about the President of the United States. I'm talking about a contact that you may have in that office that may be a big ally on your issues and your priorities, right? So take the time to know who's leaving, who's staying, and also develop a relationship, a management plan with the new people coming in, right? That happens also, like a lot of people, like after the first term of an administration, like we're having in the US, they want to, they just kind of like branch out. They want to just go to other offices, or just they leave the administration. So we all have to keep an eye on those actors that are, have been important for the work that we're doing, or can be important for the work that we'll be doing in the future. If this is the first time the organization wants to explore more, adding more, information in your platforms and in your assets connected to the political environment, right? The other, I also kind of wanted to say that, we all have a lot of work to do in the next few months, because there are many things at stake, right? And the best way to kind of like educate internal audiences about this is to really put it like just make it part of your, put that on your radar, right? Just make it part of your briefings, make it part of your, create some sort of like situational room where you kind of like keep everybody informed about what's happening. Especially those topics are very connected to the work that you do in your organization or for your clients.
Thank you. And for anyone who I have not met, I see a lot of friendly faces in this chat, but I am the director of brand and communications at OkCupid and Archer, which are two dating apps under the MatchCoop portfolio. So from the brand side, especially for OkCupid, political conversations tend to be what we lean into. And the way we remain bipartisan is by focusing on a topic that we hope does not divide anybody. And we narrow our marketing and comms efforts during elections around voting and increasing voter turnout amongst Gen Z and millennial daters, letting them choose whatever is driving them to get to the polls. And oftentimes with any moment like this, we will partner with a nonprofit. For us, we've worked with vote.org and When We All Vote. And from the brand side, those partnerships will actually drive a lot of the messaging and language you're able to use, and they will really encourage you to remain bipartisan. The next question we have, joining us are many people on the brand side, like myself, or for-profit corporations. How do you recommend in-house communicators advocate for and champion causes that align with the company's mission? And what would you look for in a potential brand partner on a campaign you're leading?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a company where, there are many kind of like business risks associated to political election cycles, you should definitely do your homework in terms of identifying, all these different risks, right, that may be prompted by political environments and, changes in the government kind of like area, right? As I mentioned before, I highly recommend that you create some sort of like digital kind of like situation room where you have really like keep everybody updated on these issues, and then so that they become part of the DNA of the organization, right? It's not only concentrating on the needs of the clients and the needs of the audiences, but also like just keeping an eye on what's happening at this very important level of society, right? I also, in nonprofit organizations, we look for partners that get this. In the private sector, brand partners, right? Brand consultants that really get this space, that we don't have to educate on this space, that speak our language, right? In terms of the crucial importance of these issues for us, especially organizations that receive a public funding, like in the case of Food Bank for New York City. And we're also looking for brand partners that help explain this policy in engaging ways without simplifying too much, which is the biggest nightmare of policy wonks, right? When policy people are in the hands of communications professionals, they really fear that there's going to be a kind of like a diluted kind of like messaging and in all these different types of very dense policy priorities, and that unfortunately the goal of the advocacy communications campaign is going to be, in a way, it's going to be digressing from the real purpose of, which is, really advancing a legislative agenda and just really having wins in some of the state budget cycles and all these different kind of like activities that are held, are conducted by government affairs teams.
We had a question come through from Piper who asked, I'm speaking as Piper. I'm always encouraged to hear of organizations eliminating jargon and using plain language. Could Carmen share some examples of the changes they are making?
Yeah, for instance, like all these government programs in the food insecurity space are very complicated. They are long, right? So some are very well known by the public at this point, such as SNAP, right? For some other programs, we always try to not use the acronym and rather kind of explain what's the program about, right? Instead of even naming the program, we decide just to kind of like say what the program does and what is the impact that it has on clients and the people that we serve. Another way to do this is just also developing a messaging that talks first about impact and then talks about the program or the policy that pertains to that impact, right? Just go first with what is going to capture the attention of audiences that don't really know much about this and how that resonates with them, their communities, and then talk about the one program that is the main program that makes all that possible, right? So that is another way we have been doing that. Those are two examples that I have at the moment.
Thank you. We also had Emily notice that many of the case studies you presented really consisted of a truly 360 approach, which we all know requires a good amount of resources. So if you were running a more grassroots effort or approach, how would you prioritize the outlets or the tactics that you are using? And would you focus on contacting elected officials or reaching audiences that are impacted by the issue at hand?
Yeah, resources in many organizations, nonprofit organizations especially, are very, very, limited. And so I highly recommend that the one person conducting, communications or just leading this area take advantage of resources out there, the ones that I mentioned, right, from all these different organizations and professional organizations. Many of those resources are free. Many of the webinars are free, like this one. And then, you really have that at your fingertips to collect tips and experiences, but also develop yours. as you go. And also in this area, like any other communications campaign, there's a lot of trial and error approach in terms of like you have to see what works, right? One thing that we haven't done, but we want to do is to run a survey, right? To understand how our clients, our audiences on social media and other platforms are perceiving this work, but also how they want to participate in it. And this is something that is kind of like next in what we want to do. That way, we make a better distribution of resources and also, know exactly where to go, right? So know what our targets are and also what platforms are working best for us. And we are more, we are just develop a more intelligent strategy and not just kind of like wasting resources and energy when we don't really have them.
Thank you. And we had one final question. The work you do is incredibly impactful and meaningful, and I'm so honored to have had the opportunity to hear you speak before, Carmen. But a lot of us really aspire to bring impact into our own day-to-day professional lives, regardless of where we are working. So where are you finding inspiration, especially this year during such turbulent times?
Yeah, even some of us in the nonprofit sector, we also experience, bad days where we are frustrated about current events and also like some practices that may not really align with some of the way we want to do this work. We at Food Bank, we don't have a shortage of mission moments, right? We share a lot of mission moments, by the way, at the beginning of every meeting, which is nice and actually beautiful. But yeah, you sometimes encounter those scenarios. I try to go back to my center, which is one, I try to develop more kind of emotional connections with the staff of elected offices that I work with. I do that by joining them, when they have events and when they have other types of engagements aside from that the legislation discussions and all this very dense type of conversation. I try to join them there, right, to see other aspects of their personalities and connect with them there. I also personally, and this is something that I hadn't done in the past when I worked in government, but now that I work in the nonprofit sector, I try to volunteer. I volunteer for my own organization. I go to our community kitchen in Harlem. We also have a volunteer shifts at our warehouse in the Bronx at the Hunts Point food market. And that is really extremely rewarding, just to not only know that this kind of like global sense that you are doing something good for our communities and the people that need it most, but also like you get the chance to talk firsthand with those that you're serving. And of course, this is not to collect testimonials there, it's just to really have an honest exchange regarding their lives and their experiences. And I encourage everybody to do that. I mean, many nonprofit organizations do that. They have volunteer programs for individuals, but also for companies, right? So it's kind of like corporate groups come to Food Bank, for instance, and they have this major kind of like mobilization of volunteers from the company to just help, deliver food. And, we also kind of like make sure our fantastic volunteer engagement teams, they make sure that those people know what the impact of the work that they did one day, right? So this is very important, and it's for everybody to just kind of like share the love and inspiration, right, in this work, and help us also retain supporters. And the other thing I have to say, joining online webinars like this one, like webinars or courses or events where I get to see kind of like face-to-face other professionals in this area with the same struggles, the same experiences, the same opportunities, and also like just really exchanging campaigns and what works best for them. It's very rewarding to me. I love to kind of collect best practices and share them the best I can. So those are kind of like the recommendations that I wanted to share regarding kind of like, just trying to get inspiration whenever possible.
Amazing. Thank you. I just want to thank Carmen again for joining us. I want to thank all of you. A couple of reminders. We do have even more impactful programming coming your way. We are not stopping here. On Thursday, April 18th, we're going to be hosting a conversation with Archie Jones of the Harvard Business School. Archie's work focuses on scaling minority businesses and leads the Harvard Business School's Impact Fund. And we will also be having additional impact councils with speakers from Danone. No, that is not an incorrect pronunciation, which I just learned in the last year. Danone and Pinterest joining us. So keep an eye out for registration details. And for you and anyone that you know who might not have been able to join us today, reminder that all of our sessions are recorded and uploaded onto our YouTube page. So please feel free to check them out there and send a link to anyone you might think would be interested in this conversation. And lastly, I dropped in Carmen's LinkedIn profile again into the chat. And I also shared a link to our monthly newsletter called The Agenda, where you can hear even more updates from our team and upcoming events. But again, just wanted to thank everyone for joining us, and we will give you a couple minutes back to grab a drink or snack before your 1 p.m. Eastern Time meetings.